I'd like to make a little explanation here on when to use custom code. Well, custom code, for those of you who know, we have this area in JCB called custom code. Now the custom code area has two implementations. The one is the JCB manual and the hash automation. And this allows you to override JCB generated code, the hash automation. The JCB manual option allows you to create code which you can use in other custom coding areas of JCB. I've made tutorials about this in the past explaining how that works, so you could just search the playlist for custom code and you'll see there's a few that deal with this. The question really is when to use, the custom or the hashing option, which is the replacing code option. My advice would be to use it as little as possible, but instead try and work with changes you want in your component through the custom code areas in JCB. So there's been a question now in the forum about changing a specific JSON decoding option. So JCB basically decode if you have a field stored as a JSON object, it has the automated feature of adding JSON decode and converting that field back to an array. So you store it and it gets stored as a JSON object, and when it loads it back, it automatically translates it back to an array. And so some of you may want to add more values to that array, or do more practical things to the value of the JSON object before it gets stored. Now we have created areas in JCB where this can be done, but with custom code, of course. And the advantage of using these areas is that when we make a change to JCB, it automatically loads that code in again at the right place without struggle. Whereas if you've used the overriding code in the IDE, it ends up sometimes not finding the place where to place the code, so you need to remap it all. And I realize some of you might find that tedious, and I would too. And so that's why I like to use the JCB available areas. So inside of an admin view, under the PHP tab, there is get item method, and there is there's get items, before translation, fix and decryption, and after. So that means if you're retrieving values, and before they get if it was a JSON value, before it gets changed to an array, you could actually target that value here, and basically it tells you that you have an array called items. So you would basically have to do for each items as item, something like that, and then you can now target each item, and you could do this in this area. And by doing that, when we make changes to JCB, it will not affect you that much, because these areas will always get placed back into the code. And so well, it will always be before they do the conversion, you can target the style value or whatever you want to target. So you might have a function here, so you maybe wrote a function, and if you want to add a function to the admin area, there's a place called custom buttons. You'd click on that, you'll see there's the controller area, there's the model area, there's the list controller area, and there's the list model area, and it actually says add PHP methods for the model that the controller will use. Now that would mean you could add models that is being called from your controller, but you could add methods that is just methods you want in your model. and this is a place to do that. So you could come here and use this area again to add functions. So let's say, for example, you add a function to the list area. Over here you want to add a function. So there you got your function added that you want to use in the list model. So you can go back to your PHP over here, which is the items, and now you can call that function, because it's going to be added to the list, the list view, the list views model. So here you could add that in there, and it can target the value before it gets converted to JSON. Now we know that in the end of the day, you storing the value in JSON because probably it needs to be used in displaying a subform or maybe an array of values in a list field. So you want it to end up in JSON in any case. So if you want to work with it after it is JSON, you could move this function. So you could say, wait, I want to get it after the data has been modeled. So you know, oh well, I'm going to deal with this style and it's already an array. So that's how I would target the specific field. And doing it this way, if JCB updates, your custom code will still land on the right place and it won't break. This is the better way. This is how I would mostly work, because I know JCB's code generating is always being improving and always getting better, and that does change the fingerprint on where we place the code if you do an in IDE code update. Although this is a stunning feature of JCB, it does require maintenance, whereas this option requires very low maintenance. And so the other place where you could actually target these values, because this is in the admin area, so let's say you want to target these values in the site area, then okay, you would close out here, you're not going to change it here, you go to the site views. The site view links up with a specific get, right? So let's say you want to change it in this one, then you open that get. It also has a custom script area, and it also has before getting the item, after getting the item. So when it's got the item, you know that the item is in a specific value. Now if the item is in a JSON, and you know that then at this point, for example, you're not working with a loop now, you're working with this this value like that, so it basically looks like this, then you know at least that the value that you're passing here like this has already been changed to an array, and you're working with an array. So that shouldn't be that hard, working with an array, and at least you can then still have your function. Now this option to add this function, I would still do it basically in the site view where this dynamic get is added. So in going back to the site view, you also have a custom buttons area where you can click yes. Obviously you're not adding any buttons by using this area here, but you still have option to add methods to your model. So you could still dump that method in here and then use it in your dynamic get in parsing these items. So I know that these places, these areas of adding code, custom code, isn't all lined up in one page and you can easily sort of realize. But if you know that you know your dynamic get, the get items, this get item is actually added to the model of this site view, then you know that if you want to add more other methods to this model, you could just dump them here, and in your dynamic get you can actually use those functions. So it does mean you need to sort of keep in mind that we're trying to follow normal MVC implementation with these with all these things coming together. So that's how I would encourage you using custom code. to try and use the custom code areas more prominently than you would in going to the IDE and using the other custom code option, which basically is this option here, right? The replacement or the insertion custom code option. This one is powerful and it does give you great freedom to change chunks of the code, but it has this maintenance downside that if JCB changes, then the placement of the code also changes, and you need to then manually just go back in there and change all those places. So I use this very sparingly, whereas using the JCB's custom code areas, I use them quite excessively. And so if we discover an area where there is constantly a need to add custom code, and you know that JCB doesn't target that area yet, then you can open a feature request, say, listen, this area, I'm constantly having to add custom code to this area. Can we get another field to target this area so that I can move my IDE custom code into a field which I know JCB will always add back in the correct place. Okay, so that's a little heads up. I don't know if that's going to help, but it is sort of a workaround for many difficult situations. Even if you think about your side view and getting list queries, there is also a before getting items and an after getting items. And after getting items, you would basically check that they are there and then start looping them. And then, as you can see, I've got a global function here called get action, and then I get, do some work on the item, and then I can use this edit link on the front of the site. So that is how I would approach changing values, always realizing, of course, that these values have already been modeled by JCB. So if it was a JSON object, it is now an array, but it shouldn't be that difficult to work with an array. There's also in the get list query, there's a place for you to add custom code, and these custom codes, they usually gets placed back into your components even if JCB gets updated, because the placeholder for this field remains in the core of JCB's component building concept, and so those things hardly ever change, and if they do, it's the exception. It's definitely not the norm. Okay, well, that's just a little bit from my side and when to use your IDE option of custom coding replacement. I would encourage you to use it sparingly and to use these other custom coding areas across JCB to a greater extent. Thanks for watching.